This is an introduction video to the A-level film course, and this video will map out exactly what will be involved over the course of the 2 years. Here's an overview of the specification. There's component 1, which is varieties of film and filmmaking. This is worth 35% of the overall qualification, and it's out of 120 marks. Section A is Hollywood, 1930 to 1990, a comparative study. Section B, American film since 2005, that's a 2-film study. Section C, British film since 1995, 2-film study. Component 2 is global filmmaking perspectives. Section A is global film, 2-film study. Section B, documentary film, that's 1 film. Section C, film movements, silent cinema. Section D, film movements, experimental film, 1960 to 2000. And component 3 is the coursework element, where you get to make a short film or write a screenplay, and then followed by a brief evaluative analysis where you reflect on the work you did. So now we're just going to briefly look at Exam 1, Section A, Hollywood 1930 to 1990, a comparative study, and the 2 Hollywood films we'll be studying for comparison are Some Like It Hot and Do the Right Thing. Section B, American film since 2005, 2-film study. 2 films will be studied, and these films will be No Country for Old Men and Boyhood. In Section C, British film since 1995, the 2 films we'll be studying will be Trainspotting and Shaun of the Dead. And then on to the second exam, Component 2, Global Filmmaking Perspectives. The 2 films we'll be studying for Section A, which is Global Filmmaking, Pan's Labyrinth and City of God. For Section B, documentary film, it's a 1-film study, and we will be studying the film Amy. For Section C, film movement, silent cinema, we'll be looking at Strike, the Sergei Eisenstein classic. Then finally, for Section D of the second exam, we'll be looking at film movements, experimental film 1960 to 2000, and we'll be looking at the film Pulp Fiction. Component 3 is a production, and we'll just look at it in a little bit more detail. You have 2 options for the coursework. You either do a short film or a screenplay for a short film. The short film needs to be 4 to 5 minutes long, no more than 5 minutes, no shorter than 4 minutes. Option 2, the screenplay has to be no shorter than 1,600 words, no longer than 1,800 words. And then either way, whichever option you pick, there has to be a written evaluation between 1,600 words and 1,800 words. The production itself is worth 40 marks, the evaluation is worth 20 marks, so out at a total of 60 marks up for grabs. So let's introduce some key elements of film form here. We can briefly split these into 2 separate categories. The technical, which is cinematography, editing and sound, and the visual, which is mise-en-scène, aesthetics and performance. So this is like a very brief video anyway, so I'm just going to briefly say that cinematography, in essence, the study of camera work, and more specifically the use of lighting, the art of light and dark, and using that when making films. Editing, so how is a film put together? Is it linear? Does it go from beginning, middle and end? Or is it play with time and space? There's a famous saying, a famous statement made by the famous filmmaker Jean-Luc Godard, which is, a film has a beginning, a middle and an end, but not necessarily in that order. And most certainly we'll be looking at films that play with that whole concept. And there's sound, so I would highly advise watching the sound video just to give you a heads up on different types of film sound. And with visual mise-en-scène, of course mise-en-scène means what's in the scene, so that's essentially the layout in terms of, say, the setting, props, costume, facial expressions, but the performance of the actors in general, their proximity to each other, body language, sort of location, buildings, use of colour, etc. Aesthetics can be stuff like a sense of artistic style. So say for instance Tim Burton, just off the top of my head, his aesthetic is gothic, so he uses a lot of light and dark, but his sort of like set designs and stuff are really nightmarish, like dreamlike, nightmare, weird sort of like shapes and exaggerated shapes, for instance, and etc. And then visual, of course, performance, which we look at separately, even though technically it comes under mise en scène, but we also look at performance in and of itself in certain elements and within certain films that we're studying for over the 2 years.